Ladies and gentlemen, there is a word that has defined generations, shaped futures, and dictated daily routines. That word is job. From our earliest days, we're taught to prepare for it, chase it, and even measure our worth by it. But I want to invite you today to listen to a higher voice, a divine voice. The voice of the one who formed you in your mother's womb and set you apart before you drew your first breath. From the very beginning of time, when God shaped man from the dust and breathed life into his nostrils, it was never about mere survival or routine labor. It was about purpose. The human soul was created not just to work, eat, sleep, and repeat. It was formed for something deeper, something sacred. You were not born to simply get a job. You were born to fulfill a purpose, a divine, unique, and eternal one. We live in a world that has confused identity with occupation. When people ask, "What do you do?" they're not asking about your impact, your calling, your passions. They're asking about your job title. And so we've learned to define ourselves by our profession rather than our position in God's plan. But let me tell you something very important. Your job is not your identity. It is not your worth. It is not your destiny. It is at best a tool, a temporary assignment. But your purpose, that's eternal. God never designed your life to revolve around a paycheck. He designed it to revolve around Him. Work was never meant to be the center of your existence. God was. In Genesis, even before sin entered the world, God gave man responsibility. Adam was to tend the garden, care for creation, but this was not a job in the modern sense. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about money. It was about stewardship. It was about partnership with God in His creation. That is purpose, not labor for income, but labor out of love and obedience. Somewhere along the way, we lost that vision. Culture trained us to value what we do more than who we are. We were told that success is found in titles, not in truth. That fulfillment comes from salary, not from service. And so people began to chase after jobs like hungry men chase bread, never realizing that they were spiritually starving while outwardly striving. Let me speak to the student who feels pressure to pick the right career, to the man who feels trapped in a job that steals his joy, to the woman who wonders if her life has more meaning than her monthly tasks. You were not made just to work. You were made to shine, to influence, to carry light into dark places. Your value isn't determined by your employment status. It's determined by the one who created you with intentionality and precision. If you live your life just looking for a job, you might find work but miss your why. You might earn income but lose insight. You might gain position but never touch purpose. And purpose is what your soul is crying out for. It's why people with high-paying jobs can still feel empty. It's why promotions don't always equal peace. Because deep down, you weren't made to clock in and out. You were made to live out something bigger, something that echoes in eternity. God has placed in every person a seed, a divine deposit of vision, gifting, passion, and potential. And that seed is not always meant to bloom in the confines of a job description. It might bloom in a mission field, a classroom, an invention, a piece of art, a conversation, or a business born from faith rather than fear. But you'll only discover it when you stop chasing jobs and start seeking Jesus. Now, this doesn't mean everyone quits working. No, work is honorable. Diligence is biblical. But the question is, are you working for purpose or just for pay? Is your work a reflection of your calling, or is it a cage that keeps you from discovering who you truly are in God? Jesus worked. Paul made tents. David tended sheep. But those things were not the core of their identity. Their true work was aligned with God's assignment. Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Paul was a missionary and teacher of truth. David became a king after God's own heart, and everything they did, every task, every move, was rooted in purpose, not just productivity. What would change in your life if you believed that you were created for more than employment? What if your daily life became an expression of God's design, not just a means of getting by? What if you looked in the mirror and saw not an employee, but a vessel, a messenger, a creator, a servant, a leader, a disciple? It's time to shift the mindset. Stop asking, what job should I get? And start asking, what was I born to do? Stop settling for tasks that simply pay the bills, and start praying for direction that fulfills your soul. Because when you step into purpose, everything changes. Work becomes joy, effort becomes worship, time becomes meaningful, and life becomes whole. You were not created for a job. You were created with a purpose, for a reason, in a season, to fulfill something eternal. And the day you realize that is the day you stop striving and start living. In today's world, the pursuit of a career has become almost synonymous with the pursuit of success. From childhood, we are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? The question isn't really about identity or values. It's about profession. Doctor, engineer, teacher, lawyer. These become labels we chase, often without ever asking the deeper, more important question, what is my assignment? What did God put me on this earth to do? There's a difference, a big difference between a career and a calling. A career is something you choose. A calling is something that chooses you. A career is often about climbing the ladder. A calling is about kneeling first and listening. A career can be changed with a degree or a resume, but a calling is etched into your spirit, unshakable, undeniable, and unreplaceable. God never asked you to chase a title. He asked you to respond to His voice. When God spoke to Abraham, He didn't say, go find a job. He said, go to the land I will show you. That was a calling, an assignment. When He spoke to Moses through the burning bush, He didn't give him a job application. He gave him a mission. Go and lead my people. These weren't careers. They were divine mandates. So often people are stuck, not because they lack ambition, but because they are following the wrong compass. They are looking outward when they should be looking upward. They are asking the world to define their worth when they should be asking God to reveal their assignment. The result? They end up with jobs that fill their calendars but drain their souls. When you pursue a job without seeking your assignment, you might find temporary success, but long-term fulfillment will always elude you. You might earn a good salary but still feel a deep, aching void. That's because you weren't created to merely function. You were created to flow in divine purpose. And until you discover that purpose, no position will ever feel quite right. There's a story in Scripture about the young prophet Samuel. As a boy, he hears God calling his name in the night, but he doesn't recognize the voice. He runs to Eli, thinking it's the priest calling him. Eli eventually tells him, the next time you hear the voice, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This moment is profound. Samuel had to learn the difference between human voices and God's voice. In the same way, we must learn to distinguish the voice of culture, the voice of expectation, and even our own voice from the still, clear voice of God, the one who assigns purpose. When you begin to seek your assignment instead of a job, something incredible happens. Your steps become more intentional. You stop comparing your path to others because you realize your journey is unique. You stop chasing titles and start pursuing truth. You no longer settle for what's expected. You search for what's eternal. Some of the most impactful people in history didn't have impressive resumes. They didn't always hold prestigious positions, but they were walking in their assignment. That's what made them powerful. That's what made them unshakable. A person walking in their divine assignment has more impact than a person with 10 degrees but no direction. Let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with having a job or building a career, but those things should be aligned with your calling, not in place of it. Your career should serve your calling, not compete with it. If your career pulls you away from the things God has placed in your heart, your passion, your values, your spiritual growth, then it's time to reassess. Because a job may give you security, but only your assignment will give you peace. God's assignment for you may not come with applause or recognition. It may not come with a corner office or a big title, but it will come with eternal weight. It will change lives. It will glorify Him. It will stretch you, yes, but it will also fulfill you like nothing else ever could. You won't have to force open doors. God will open them. You won't have to fight for attention. You'll have favor. Because when you walk in your assignment, heaven backs you. And sometimes your assignment might look like a job. You might be called to teach in a classroom, build a business, or serve in a profession. But the difference is that your why will be rooted in heaven, not in the world. You won't just be clocking in, you'll be carrying out a mission. Every email, every meeting, every decision becomes part of something much greater than a paycheck. It becomes part of your purpose. The truth is, many people never stop long enough to ask God what He wants. They move from one opportunity to the next, trying to find satisfaction in external achievements. But the soul doesn't respond to promotions, it responds to purpose. And purpose only comes when you're connected to the one who created you. So ask yourself today, not just what do I want to do, but what was I made to do? Be still enough to hear, be bold enough to follow, and trust that when you walk in your assignment, provision will follow, peace will fill you, and purpose will guide you every step of the way. Because God didn't say, go find a job. He said, when you understand that your life is driven by purpose and not just by a job title, everything about how you view provision begins to shift. The world teaches us that our income is the source of our security, that the job is the provider. But Scripture paints a much different picture. It tells us that God is the source. The job is merely a channel. And when you walk in His purpose for your life, you will come to realize that provision doesn't come from where you work. It comes from who you walk with. This truth is both simple and profound. Provision follows purpose. When God gives you an assignment, He also takes responsibility for resourcing it. He doesn't call you to something and then leave you scrambling to figure out how to make it happen. When He gives purpose, He gives provision. Maybe not always in the way you expect, not always with a steady salary, benefits, or bonuses, but always in the way that meets your needs and prepares you for growth. Look at the life of Elijah. When God sent him to prophesy during a time of drought, there was no job waiting for him, no earthly means of survival. But God said, go to the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. Notice that? God didn't say, I'll feed you anywhere you go. He said, I've prepared your provision there, where I've called you to be. The provision was connected to the place of obedience. Elijah didn't have to chase resources. He just had to follow instructions. And as long as he stayed in purpose, the provision kept coming from the most unlikely sources. That's how God works. He doesn't bless your plans. He blesses your obedience. If you're outside of the purpose He's called you to, you may be working hard but struggling to feel satisfied. You may be earning money but lacking peace. That's because provision, real provision, is not just about money. It's about having everything you need to fulfill what you were born to do. That includes opportunities, relationships, open doors, wisdom, strength, and yes, finances too. So many people spend their lives chasing jobs, hoping for more money, thinking if they just earn a little more, save a little more, then they'll feel secure. But no amount of money can substitute for purpose. Provision without purpose leads to emptiness. You might have a full bank account, but an empty heart. But when you pursue purpose, provision comes with it, and it comes with peace, clarity, and joy. Consider Jesus' ministry. He had no steady job, no business, no personal wealth. And yet everything he needed for his assignment was provided. People gave, miracles happened, bread multiplied, taxes were paid, even from the mouth of a fish. Why? Because he was walking in divine purpose, fully submitted to the Father's will. He didn't chase resources. He walked in alignment, and resources found him. Now, this doesn't mean you don't work. It doesn't mean you sit still and expect miracles without effort. But it means you stop relying on your own strength and start depending on his guidance. You work hard, yes, but you work where he tells you, how he tells you, and when he tells you. You stop asking, will this job pay enough? And start asking, is this part of my assignment? Because when you walk in purpose, God takes care of the rest. Some of you are afraid to step into your calling because it doesn't look financially safe. It doesn't promise a big paycheck or job security. But what if I told you that the safest place to be, financially, emotionally, spiritually, is in the center of God's will? It may not be comfortable, it may not always make sense, but it will always be covered. Because if God sends you, He will sustain you. This is the faith shift many of us need to make. Moving from job dependence to God dependence. From trusting in salaries to trusting in promises. From obsessing over positions to aligning with purpose. Because God doesn't want you living in survival mode. He wants you thriving in your calling, fully alive and fully provided for. And here's something beautiful. When you start living by purpose, you stop worrying so much about money. You begin to realize that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, that He opens doors no man can shut, that He can use a stranger, a widow, a business deal, a side project, or a divine connection to bring what you need. That's why Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." All these things, not some, all. The house you need, added. The wisdom for the next step, added. The finances for the vision, added. The right people, added. The strength to keep going, added. But notice the order. Seek the kingdom, not the paycheck. Seek His righteousness, not recognition. Get in line with His plan, not just your own. When you walk in purpose, God walks with you, and He brings what you need with Him. So if you've been wondering how you'll make it, how you'll afford it, how you'll survive the next season, stop worrying about the how and start focusing on the who. Because provision isn't your job's responsibility, it's God's. And He is always faithful. You don't have to chase blessings, just chase purpose. You don't have to strive for more, just stay in position. Because when you're in purpose, real purpose, provision will follow like a shadow every step of the way. So as we come to the end of this message, I want to leave you with this truth. You were not created to live in fear, to strive endlessly, or to chase the world's definition of success. You were created for divine purpose. And when you step into that purpose, when you stop looking for a job and start looking for your assignment, you step into a life where peace replaces pressure, where provision follows obedience, and where fulfillment is no longer a distant hope, but a daily reality. Don't let the noise of the world drown out the voice of the one who made you. Don't trade your calling for comfort or your purpose for a paycheck. Lift your eyes. Look higher. Ask God, why did you create me? And then, when He shows you, follow Him with everything you have. Because your job may pay the bills, but your purpose will feed your soul. And when you walk in that purpose, trust me, God will take care of the rest. Thank you, and may you walk boldly into your calling.